They must be ready.
All right. Y'all feel free to keep eating, but we're going to go ahead and get started because there's so much to share. As Kristen has said, I am Tracy Myers. My husband is the senior pastor here at First Baptist Opelika, but I also have the privilege of the director over women's ministry. And as it's already been said from Kristen, we have a wonderful team, and y'all make it worth every bit of it. Thank y'all for being here. Your beautiful faces, your smiling faces in the fellowship that we're already hearing. I have the great privilege of introducing my friend, Kathy Tidwell. I've had a wonderful time getting to know her, and she has been here with First Baptist for over 20 years. She's even worked here. Many of y'all know her. Many of y'all love her, and she has a powerful story that will allude to what Ashley shared with the salt and the light. And we're just going to start at the beginning. We're going to kind of converse for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to go to the tables and let y'all do some of the conversing, and then we'll come back and share more of Kathy's story. So we're going to get started. Miss Kathy, we're going to get started. You got two ladies up here that are not native Alabamians.
No, we're not.
So I'm from Texas, and Kathy is a Florida girl. So we get here, and I'm sure there's others in the crowd that are the same way. But we are glad to be here in Alabama. You've been here longer than I have.
Yes.
But you have enjoyed. But tell us some about Florida.
Well, I grew up in, I was actually born in Orlando, and I was born to a 17-year-old young girl who was not married. And a couple months later, her and my father got married, and there they are. They look so happy. And then that's them in the middle, and I'm the one with the hand like this, which I've never done since, so I don't know where that came from. And then the other picture is at the children's home, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I have never, other than that one picture, I have never seen my parents happy. When we were growing up, there were 6 of us. By the time I was 7, I had 5 brothers and sisters. So my parents had one after the other after the other. So very large family. My father was a disabled veteran from the service, and they lived from paycheck to paycheck in a little shotgun house in Crawfordville, Florida, which we loved at the time. I mean, we didn't know any different. It was on a dirt road, and you know, we'd run up down the dirt road and play in the woods and, you know, whatever. But my parents were both alcoholics. They became alcoholics over the years. And they would go to the commissary on payday and get their, you know, they would get food, which we would be excited because we would get to eat really good, you know, for that night. But they would also get their alcohol, and they would come home and they would drink. When they drank, they fought a lot. And I'm not talking little arguments. I'm talking the knockdown, drag out, you know, where you know, frying pan across the head and that kind of thing. Pretty severe. We would stay out of their way as much as possible, but if we got in the way, then we would reap the consequences of that. I can remember my father's preference with discipline was a belt. He would pull his belt off, and once he pulled his belt off, we would be like, oh no, you know, here comes the belt. But that was fine. But my mother chose a coat hanger that she liked to stretch out. And she would stretch out a coat hanger, and she would whack us across the back of the legs. And I can still feel those welts on the back of the legs, you know, but... and that would be whenever we would do anything that they deemed was not what we should be doing, which, you know, with 6 kids under the age of 10 was going to happen a lot. And I have a couple of good memories of my father. I remember him going to oystering, and I know a lot of you probably don't like raw oysters. I grew up on them. It's a staple to me.
It's Florida.
It's Florida, and so he would bring oysters home, and he'd crack open the oysters, and we would stand in a line, all 6 of us, and slurp them down as fast as he could shuck them. And the other thing I remember about my father is that I know it's gross, but I love him so. You know, my kids are like, yeah, you know, but I love him so. He also had, I can remember the way he smelled. It's funny how your memory does things like that, how you can remember certain things. My daddy always smelled like Old Spice and Vitalis. I don't know if you remember Vitalis, but it was the stuff that you put in your hair that made it, you know, he had perfect hair, so it had to get that way somewhere, you know. So he would put Vitalis in his hair, and so I remember those smells. And I remember once in a while he would let me he would want me to rub his head, and I remember rubbing and getting that greasy feeling on my fingers and everything. But, of course, you know, I did. I don't have any good memories of my mother. I hate that, but I really don't. My mother was a sad person, but then, you know, if I had 6 kids under the age of 7, I would probably be sad too. But I also have learned over the years that my mother had a very hard life. She had been raised the only way, you know, she'd been raised with alcoholics. She had gone through the same kind of things, so that's kind of what we knew. You know, my parents were, they were my parents, but loving, no, they were not loving. I don't know what happened to change them. I don't know if there were, because I've been told, you know, that they, at one time, they were really happy and loved each other. And I would think so, since there's 6 of us to show for that love. But, you know, I still, you know, I don't know what happened to change that. But my mother just always looked like life had worn her down. She just looked, you know, just tired and worn, and like she just had no happiness, no enjoyment, and I really hate that. I remember the day that my father died. He went in the hospital, and I was just turned 10, and my mother came out, and we were in the car, because back then you could leave your kids in the car, and nobody, especially 6 of us, nobody was going to bother us. And but she left us in the car, and you know, she came out, and there was a gentleman with her, and brought her to the car and said that that our father had died. You know, she said our father had died, and I didn't know what that was going to mean to us. You know, I didn't know if that meant that things would get better because there wasn't going to be anybody to fight with. That was my hope, you know, a 10-year-old hope. I remember the first time that I went to church was at his funeral, and my fraternal fraternal father? Yeah, my fraternal grandmother made sure that we were dressed to the nines because, you know, it's a small southern town in the South, and she was very elite in her little town, you know. She wore her gloves to the post office, you know. And so she was going to make sure that we were all dressed. So we were all dressed perfectly for the funeral. I remember the funeral. I remember going to the funeral, and he was laying in his dress blues. And I remember all that. And, you know, we went home after the funeral, and so I thought things would get better, but they really didn't. My mother got worse. The alcoholism got worse. She started going out a lot at night. She would go to what we call juke joints. Crawfordville was considered a dry county, but if you wanted something, you could find it, and usually it was at these juke joints, and they were in the woods, and she would go to the woods, and a lot of times she would take us and leave us in the car. So we would be, the 6 of us would be in the car while she would go in the juke joint, and it'd be late at night, dark, because you're in the middle of the woods, and eventually the men made their way to the car. They started realizing that there were 6 children out there in the car, and so they thought that was prime opportunity for them to come and pay a visit. And it was not a pleasant visit. It was very, first time I'd haven't had any dealings with anything like that, and it was just a hard time. It was a very hard time. It got to the point where I would beg my mother to leave us at home. And more she started doing that. She would start leaving us at home and going out, and she would be gone for days. And I was 10, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to feed everybody. You know, you have all these siblings, and we're all hungry. And so I learned to cook oatmeal with no sugar, and would lather it down with butter, so we would have that. And I cooked peas one time. I did not know that dry peas had to be soaked. So I cooked them, and they were like China berries that you could shoot out of a BB gun. So needless to say, we could not eat those. But, you know, I did what I could, but we were at home a lot. Sometimes she would bring the men home, and when she brought the men home, they would make their way into our bedrooms. And so it was a terrible existence, and it went on for, my father died in June, and it went on until November. And so it seemed like an eternity, but it really wasn't an eternity, but it seemed like it. In a child's mind, it was forever. And my fraternal grandmother stepped in, and she called welfare back then, and called welfare. They came and got us, took us to her house, because, like I said, it was a very small Southern Baptist town, and, you know, people kind of minded their own business and didn't really, you know, get involved and stuff like that. So the grandmother wanted us, so we went to the grandmother. And she kept us a few months, you know, but she did not like children. So to have 6 of them dropped on her doorstep was really not her favorite thing to have.
Sounds like it.
She really did not like, and she surely didn't like me, because in her eyes, I was born before my parents got married. Therefore, I was not her son's child. Therefore, I did not belong to her. Therefore, I was there by the grace of her kindness. And she let me know that very immediately when we got there, and told me that constantly through my life, that, you know, well, you know, you're not my granddaughter, but it's okay, you know. And so I heard that constantly through my life. So you talk about rejection, you know, it was just a constant series of rejections, you know, but, you know, as God would have it, and God had a plan even back then. Even though I did not know God, I did not see God, I did not, as far as I knew, it was like a foreign planet, or a, you know, there was no God. And my grandmother's pastor, she did go to a little church in Crawfordville. He heard of the Florida Baptist Children's Home, and he decided that we would, that might be a good fit for us. So my grandmother contacted them, and she took us there, the Florida Baptist Children's Home. We each had a bag of belongings. When I say bag, I don't mean a suitcase. I mean a real bag, a paper grocery bag full of a couple of belongings. And so that's me at the children's home. When I went to the Florida Baptist Children's Home, it was the most wonderful place I had ever seen in my life. It had 9 buildings. 4 of them were 2-story, and we had never been in a 2-story house, so that was like amazing. My brother, she took 4 of us. I need to add that. She only took 4 of us. The youngest 2 she kept. So she took the oldest 4. And so when we got there, we walked into this massive, beautiful house with these immaculate hardwood floors, beautiful banisters, and a doorbell. And, you know, we were just, my brothers who were little, I mean, I was 10, and they were, you know, younger. All they could see was sliding up and down those banisters, and they did. They immediately started sliding on the banisters and running around and ringing the doorbell. And my grandmother dealt with the house mother that we had at the time. And then my grandmother left, and we were left alone with this lady who we had never met, and in this place that we did not know a soul. And she took us up to our rooms, and at that time my sister and I would share a room, but we had our own bed for the first time. She had her bed, and I had my bed, and we had our own dresser and our own desk and our own closet. Not that we had anything to put in any of it, but we had it. It was there, so that was kind of exciting. And they offered us a meal, and being where we came from, we were always hungry. So they took us down to the kitchen and gave us hot dogs and chocolate milk. And it was like the best meal we had ever had. I mean, we were just like, we're going to love this place, you know, hot dogs and chocolate milk in the middle of the day. You know, and not only that, but it was just, you know, it's huge, it was beautiful, it was just, you know, and my brothers and sisters really did not know what was going on. And to be honest, I'm not sure that I did either. I think I knew, but I think there was some part of me that was just relieved, you know, just relieved to be in a place where I thought I might be safe. So I went to the children's home, and I loved it. I thrived there. We had our own rooms. Everything was, my brothers and sister did not thrive there. They did not do well. My brothers ran away several times. My sister was just very unhappy. And, but for some reason, I just felt like I had finally was at a place where God could, no, it wasn't God, where I could just have peace. Because I still did not believe in God. Of course, it was Florida Baptist Children's Home. So, as all good Florida Baptists do, we went to church. And they took us to church every time the door opened. We were the faithful. We were there on Sunday mornings, Sunday night, Wednesdays, and any other time that the door was open. Back then, there were a lot of revivals, and we went to all of them. But I did not pay attention because I was not the least bit interested in God. What I had heard at church, I realized, in my mind, God was not that. He could not be that. He was not that. Because how could a God that loves you and want to do for you say, leave you in a car with men? How could a God put you with parents that are alcoholics that are going to abuse you, or allow you to be abused? How could God do that?
So it was a dark time.
It was a very dark time. It was a very dark time. I can't even imagine. I did not think that there would be a light. I did not. And you're also talking about you're dealing with not only being displaced, but the rejection, the abuse, and there's nowhere for that to go. You're in a situation where there's no environment to help you, through that. The children's home did the best they could, but there were 17 kids in my building, and it was a house mother, a house father, and a cook. There were 3 adults with 17 kids, so they did what they could, but they met your needs, physically, and we went to the dentist. The first time I'd been to the dentist, we went to doctors. We did all that kind of stuff, but it was just a very, I just didn't believe God. I didn't believe that God existed. How could He exist? How could a loving God, a God who they're talking about in church, that was a church God. That was not a real God, because real God wouldn't have let that happen.
But you had a friend.
I had a friend.
And a mom that invested in you.
I did. I was very fortunate. I met a girl who's 12. I was 12 at the time, and so was she, and she just moved into town. And for some reason, she took a liking to me. She just saw this girl who...
There's a lot to like. There's a lot to like, lady.
But, but she saw this girl that she just thought, you know what, I really like her. And she introduced me to her mom, and her mom, I have to say this, they looked beyond what was there to what could be there. And that's important to remember, because what was there was broken. There was nothing. It was a broken kid who put on a happy face and did everything they could not to draw attention to themselves. That was what was there. But they saw beyond, her mother and father saw beyond that to a person, to the possibilities. And they invested in that possibility. So, one thing I want to be sure is I encourage you to look beyond the outside and look at the possibilities of what God can do to the inside. Because that's what they did. And that is what really saved me. It wasn't church. It was a family that invested in me and taught me about God. They taught me about Jesus. They taught me that I had a Father that loved me and would not leave me. They taught me that even in the dark times that God was still there. They showed me a family that loved each other, that fought but got along, that didn't hit, that didn't argue, that didn't abuse, that allowed for differences, and they included me in that. They included me, and so every opportunity I got, I went to Bee's house. They would call and say, can Kathy come over? And I'd be like, please, please, please say yes, you know, because it was up to my house mother. And she would say, sure, she can come over after church. And so I would look forward to church to get to go to Bee's house, you know. But the main thing they did is they taught me about Jesus. They taught me that God loved me. And that's a hard thing when you're a 12-year-old broken girl that has never known that. It's a hard thing to grasp. It's a hard, but they lived it, they showed it, and they taught me that God loved me. Even though Satan was saying, no, nobody's going to love you, they showed me that God loved me, even me, a broken kid from the middle of nowhere in the woods who had been through some horrific things, that he loved me. Me. Now, I don't know about you, but that was powerful. That was powerful to know that for the first time in my life, I had somebody that was not going to leave me. They weren't going to put me in the woods. They weren't going to let strange men come and, you know, whatever. Or if they did, he was going to be there with me. I was never going to be alone again. And I can't tell you how that one thing made all the difference in my life, but I'm going to tell you because we have more of the story.
We do. But I just want to finish before we turn to the tables. So that led you to accepting Jesus.
It did. Eventually, because of her family and because I started really paying attention in church and really seeing God, I really saw God and saw Jesus and saw the good. It led me to finally accept Christ. And so I went down in church and was baptized. And I was 12 years old. And I accepted Christ at the age of 12, 2 years after I'd gone to the children's home. And, you know, it was like a freedom I had never known, but like a peace I had never known. It was you know, it's like I had something that was all mine. And when you come from a home like I came from, you don't have things that are all yours. But for the first time, I had something that was all mine. And yes, he's yours too, but he's mine, you know, and he's all mine. And he's there for me. And that really changed the course of my life, the whole course.
At this part of the story, of Kathy's story, that the dark to light entered, and Scripture even supports that light came into the world, and he did that personally to Kathy. He's done that to me, and we'll talk about that later on as we go on. But we're going to turn it to the tables now. You have a table host, and she has some questions there. I will tell you the questions we're going to start kind of light this first go around. They'll lead and direct, and if you'll go around the table and feel free to share, we're going to give y'all some time to do that, and then we will be back. All right.
Commercial break.
Commercial break. All right, ladies, we're going to get started again. The conversation. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for conversing and fellowshipping. Hopefully you're meeting new people and making relationships with even friends that you've known for a while. It's good to see y'all conversing. So in front of your seat, you should have this little pack. So everyone has one, if you will take that. And we're going to step into the second theme of the night. We started with light. And we're now going to go to salt. So if you will open your packet and you lick your finger, I promise you it's going to be okay. It'll be good. Stick it in there. And put some salt on your tongue. Hopefully you have a little dinner left. A little. Miss Faye got too much. One of the themes when we were at women's retreat with the women's ministry team was we talked about the salt and the light. And one of the things about the salt is completely there to be used to enhance your food. And even the Lord pictures that we are here to enhance whatever the Lord has for us to do. One of our roles as believers, after we come out of the dark and step into the light, yes, with salvation, that we are to be salt and enhance. And we're going to step into this time with Kathy sharing her story of how she enhanced a great many people's lives, but a very special person's life she enhanced. So we're going to start there, but I'm going to start with the picture on the left.
Okay, the picture right there is B, my friend B, who I've known since I was 12. And that's a recent picture. She came to Toby's funeral, and she also has been to visit me since, and then I've been to visit her. So that's B, and of course that's Toby, the way he, I would say that's the way he looked when I met him, but he had a full beard and mustache when I met him. So, but that's his Navy picture. And then the other is our wedding picture, and I believe Tracy would like me to tell you the story of our wedding.
Well, talk about how you met first.
Okay, yes.
This is
we were
sweet.
A blind date. We were actually B. My friend B married a guy that was in the Navy, and he was in the same squadron with Toby. And so she kept saying, there's this guy you need. She lived in Jacksonville, and I lived in Lakeland, and she kept saying, you need to come to Jacksonville, meet this guy. And I'm like, really? I mean, I'm not going on a blind date, you know. She's like, no, he's really great. Y'all would be perfect together. You really, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, she had a baby, so I went to see her, and she had set us up on a blind date. Of course, as good friends do. And so we met, and when he first came out, he had a full beard and mustache, and he looked like Fidel Castro. And I'm like, no. And he thought I was too tall and skinny. As you can tell, I used to be. And still tall, not the other part too much, but. And so we were like, oh, this is not going to work. But we went to the zoo, and we went on a picnic with B and Dawn, and we actually kind of liked each other. We started, that was Labor Day weekend, and we dated a little bit off and on. I lived in Lakeland. He was in Jacksonville, so, of course, it was not that regular, but we did date a little bit off and on. He got shipped out in January, the end of December, the 1st of January, got shipped out. And in the Navy, you're shipped out for 6 months at a time. So he got shipped out, so we got to know each other really through the mail. I know that's a novel idea, but back then, that's what you did. You know, I have all the letters, which I'm very thankful I have all of our letters. And we wrote through, we got to know each other through the mail, and I fell in love. I was madly in love with him. He was funny. He was kind. You know, I didn't ask him if he was a Christian. At that point, it didn't matter to me, which is not what the Bible says, but I was in love. You know, I had met this man that I knew I was in love with. Well, he came back in May. Now, remember, we had just met August. We had dated through to December. He got shipped out. And so we really had not dated that much. And he came back in May, and he said, well, I'm going back to Alabama. I'll see you. Well, I was crushed because I had fallen in love, and evidently he didn't feel the same. So he came back to Alabama. But he came back, and he got a job. And then he called me, and he said, I want you to meet me in Jacksonville. We're going to meet in Jacksonville, and I want you to come for a visit for 2 weeks. And I said, okay. So I was young, 19, and I was working, going to night school, and I went in and asked my boss, as any 19-year-old would do, if I could have 2 weeks off. And they said no. And I said, I quit. As any 19-year-old would do. And so I quit my job. I figured I was young. I'd find another one when I got back. And so I drove from Lakeland to Jacksonville. And when I got to Jacksonville, Toby had rented a U-Haul trailer. And he met me out at the trailer. As soon as I drove up, I mean, he was right out the door. And his sister was with him, by the way. But anyway, he met me out at the trailer, and he's like, look, he said, there's no sense making 2 trips. That was my husband, very practical. No sense making 2 trips. We're going to get married, so let's go get your stuff. I said, like as any 19-year-old in love would do, I said, okay. And so we loaded up and came back to Alabama, and we moved into his parents' house, who had no idea that he was bringing me home. And we moved into there. We unloaded my apartment, which was on a Sunday, and there was no one to call, so I called Bee's mom and said, I'm going to Alabama to get married, so can you have my utilities and everything turned off? And sure, okay, you know. And his parents happened to be gone when I moved into their house. And, you know, that started a relationship really well. And, but no, he met him at the door. They had gone to Atlanta, and he met him at the door, and he said, look, he said, Kathy and I are going to get married. There was no sense in making 2 trips, so here we are. And they were like, okay. And so 2 weeks later, after we scrambled around, we found a place to live. We got our license, which I was barely old enough to get a license. Toby's mother knew the judge up in Camp Hill. She says, oh, she's marrying Toby. It'll be fine. And he's like, okay. So, you know, he signed it. And so it pays to live in a small town, I'm just saying. And we had to get blood tests back then. And
this was in Auburn, right?
Well, they were actually in Dadeville at the time. So we were in Tallapoosa County trying to get that. Now, we had we had rented a place to live in Auburn because Toby had gotten a job working. So we had rented a place in Auburn, and Toby's parents bought me the dress that I have on, that little mini skirt. And Toby had on his nice red jacket. Don't we look so cute? We were so cute. And we had that. They did not go to church. His family was not raised in church. They did not go to church. So we found a preacher, Lauren Sutton, who is from this area, who agreed to marry us. And so we were going to get married 4th of July weekend. Now, we had not even known each other a year at this point in time. We had barely dated 6 months at the most. But anyway, Lauren Sutton agreed to marry us, and we were going to get married on the weekend. Well, he called the weekend before and said, you know what, my wife and I have decided to go out of town. If you want to get married, I can marry you tomorrow night. We were like, okay. So we went to Lauren Sutton's house, which he graciously provided as our event, or whatever you call it, the venue, thank you, it's a venue, was his house. And we said our I-do's in front of Toby's brother and sister, and went to McDonald's drive-thru for our reception.
All right.
And we had McDonald's for everyone, which was his mom, dad, sister, and brother. That was our reception. And we went back and had McDonald's hamburgers, and he got up and went to work the next day. And he got to work, and he said, I need to add my wife onto my insurance. And they were like, your wife? We didn't know you were married. Oh, I got married last night. You could have had a day off, Toby. Well, I didn't need one. And so that was the start of our marriage. 43 years almost later, we were still together. So trust me, blind dates do work out sometimes. You never know.
But he had grown up
he had not grown up in a church.
But he grew up different from you in the sense with a mom and a dad, in a good marriage, in a good home.
Yeah, his mom and dad, his mom stayed home, never worked. His dad, they lived in Auburn, and, you know, he had his mom home every day when he went home. He had a brother and a sister, a nice, stable, grew up in Auburn, loved it. Everybody knew everybody, you know. it was just, his environment was entirely different than mine, which I will say caused quite a few conflicts in the beginning, because I couldn't understand the family dynamics, like, when your mother calls, you answer, which I wish my son would hear this, son. I'm kidding. My son's very good. I'm teasing. But, I couldn't understand the family dynamics of that, and so we struggled a little bit, sometimes a lot with that. But, as all marriages, you work through it, and we did. He was not a Christian, though. His family had not gone to church. They were not, raised in church. They didn't see the importance of it. And so, and I will say this, when we first got married, neither one went to church. We partied a lot. He was coming back into his hometown with his friends, and we partied a lot. We went out a lot. And after about 3 years of that, he started talking the kid talk. Him and his parents started talking the kid talk. And I'm like, no, don't think so. And finally, I told him the only way that we would have children is if we quit the lifestyle that we were doing, that I would not bring children into an environment such as I had been brought into. And we weren't alcoholics, but, it could have been easily. We could have gone that way easily. So we both agreed that that was what we would do, and so we stopped. We did not go to parties anymore, and I actually started going to church. Now, Toby did not go to church. He did not see a need for church. And for a while, it was a bone of contention between us, but I had a very wise Sunday school teacher. Well, we had Amber, and I started taking Amber to church. And then I had Austin and started taking Austin to church. But Toby never said, don't go to church. And he never said, I wish you wouldn't go today. He never said that. It was fine. Go to church. Take the kids, whatever. I don't know if he won that time alone or... but, he never did. He was never one of those that said you can't go. He was always like, go, enjoy, He would come to church on Easter, Christmas if there was a special event. If the kids had a program, he would come to church, but he did not come to church. It wasn't until, let's see, I had a point that I was trying to make, but I've lost it. But anyway, it'll come back around sometime. But I had a wise Sunday school teacher because I would fuss about him not coming to church. And it was becoming a bone of contention in our house. I was like, why don't you come to church? The kids need to see you in church. And it became a issue. And I had a very wise Sunday school teacher at this church that I went to. And she said, look, Kathy, she said, it is not your job to save your husband. It is God's job. She said, it is your job to live as God has called you to do. And she also said, you decide the tone of your house. And if you're going to make this a bone of contention, you will never bring him to Christ that way. And she said, you have got to let this go and let God be. And she told me to take my Bible and put his name in my Bible on a sticky note and stick it in the front of my Bible. And every time I opened up my Bible to pray for his salvation. So I did. And from then on, I never again said, I need you to go to church. I need to go to church. Now, so for 20 years, well, let's see, Amber went away to college, and Austin decided that he wanted to change churches because he wanted to come to a church where all of his friends went, which was this church. And since it was just he and I going, I said, sure, because to me it was more important that he be in an environment that he loved than, where we went. And so we told Toby that we were going to change churches, and we were going to this other church. And Toby said, oh, that's fine. And the men in this church, several of the men in this church found out because our kids played ball with their kids, they grew up with their kids, they all thought Toby was a Christian because Toby was a good guy. He was the best. He was kind to everybody. He was sweet. He was just a good guy. And everybody thought he was a Christian. And, you know, when we came to church and Toby didn't come, they said, "Where's Toby?" And I said, "Well, he doesn't go to church. He's not a Christian." Whoa, that put the radars out. And the men in the church immediately made it their mission to start ministering to Toby. And they ministered every Sunday for months until, I mean, they came and visited every Sunday. A group, a couple of men would come and visit Toby on Sundays and just talk to him, and just visit with him. And they would visit with them at the ball field, and they would, that because they had known Toby. And so, in the meantime, I'm just praying, that. So finally, Toby and Austin and I say, "Toby, we're going to join First Baptist." And he's like, "Wait a minute, don't do it yet, don't do it yet." And we were like, "Why?" And Austin even said, "Dad," he said, "we love you, but we're going to heaven. Where are you going?" And Austin told him that. And Austin was, I think, 14 or 15 at the time. And he said, we're going to heaven. Where are you going, Dad?" And I think it really struck him that his own son wondered about where he was going to go. And he said, "Just give me some time." So he made an appointment on his own, met with the pastor, which was Ron Madison at the time, met with the pastor, accepted Christ in the pastor's office, and was baptized at the age of 40. Let's see, we'd been married 20 years, so he was 40-something when he was baptized.
Amen.
41 years old. And became a Christian. And, the difference it made was unbelievable. I mean, he was a good guy. I mean, he was a great father. He was a great, great husband. He was just a good man. Very kind. But the difference it made in our home to have my husband accept Christ, even at the age of 41, was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget Novella Gray. I'm going to say Novella Gray's name out loud. Novella Gray came up to him after church and said, "You're going to be in Bible study tomorrow night." And he's like, "Yes, ma'am." And he did. And he started Bible study the very next night after he accepted Christ and was baptized, and started going to Bible study, and did till the Monday before he died, or before he went in the hospital. So that is a true testimony of God's people, and how they ministered, and how they reached out, and how they loved and brought a person, and how prayer, praying through this, because now, they prayed through this, and I prayed through this, and the kids were even praying for their father, and he became a Christian at the age of, that's a rarity. I don't know if you realize how rare that is, but that is a rarity for someone to become a Christian at an older age. But he did. He became a Christian and became a wonderful, godly man. Not only that, he started teaching Sunday school, which when they asked him if he would teach, he was like, "I'm not a teacher." And he said, "Look, I don't even know the Bible," because he really didn't. And they were like, "Oh, but you'll be great. You'll be great." And so he started teaching our Sunday school class, and it was very refreshing, because he would say, "I don't know about y'all, but this is like good stuff. I didn't know there were wars, and I didn't know they had battles in here, and I didn't know there were wars," and because he had never read the Bible. He'd never picked up a Bible. And so he was real excited about it. Everything was new to him, everything that he opened up. And sometimes I wish that we could go back to that moment where it's new, that I could go back to that moment. But because of him, I was able to go back to that moment. I was able to see it through new eyes. I was able to see God's Word in a whole different way, and to see that it is pretty good stuff.
It is.
It really is. And he did that. He became the head of our household. He became a godly man who, was everything, to me. And so, so that was how blessed I was. I was a very blessed woman.
All right. We're going to take a pause, but before we do, you've seen through the Lord, through Kathy's life, of dark to light, and then you've seen how she was salt and enhanced. And it sounds like God did the very same to you once Toby received the Lord. He enhanced your life
tremendously.
So we're going to let y'all have some more table discussion So y'all take a few minutes, about 10 minutes to discuss around the table, and we'll finish up. All right, ladies, we want to be conscious of your time, and conversation is great, but we want to make sure Kathy finishes the last part of this story that's continuing on today. Before we start, we talked about salt and we've talked about light, but just something I wanted to do in every church Jeff and I've served, and maybe one day we'll do it, is y'all know the shows. They're terrible shows, so I'm going to preface it by they're terrible shows. But you know the Real Housewives of you're seeing the real women of Auburn and Opelika, real women. And thank you, Kathy, for sharing as we go into this last part. We talked about salt, and we talked about light, and we talked about enhancement. And these are my favorite pictures in the whole set. Kathy sent me some slew of wonderful pictures, but there's some family pictures. They're wonderful. So why don't you go ahead and start, Kathy, with the pictures.
Of course, that's our family, and that's an old picture. My kids were like, can you use a different one? I was like, no, I really like that one. And then for our 40th anniversary, the kids sent us to Mexico. And that was our 40th anniversary in Mexico. And we were so fun. We had such a good time. And then the other two are my little loves. And I'll tell you about my loves in a little bit. But I lost Toby this year. It was a year ago Friday. This is the hard part. But he went in the hospital and was in the hospital a month, and he said that he knew he would not, that he had messed up. He said, I've messed up. And I said, yeah, yeah, you have. And so he passed away. And I can't tell you until you've been there what that's like. If you've never been there, it's hard to describe the feeling that you have. It's like an emptiness, like a part of your heart is gone, and you don't see how you'll ever get it back. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was never going to be able to recover. Toby and I, you know, like all marriages, we had our problems. You know, we had difficulties, but God gave us the last couple years of wonderful times. I had retired from the church, and we were at home together a lot, and we went fishing a lot, which I don't fish, but he loves it, and you know, I read, and he's fine with that. So, but we spent a lot of time together, and it was a very sweet time. It was a healing time for some things that we had been through, and it was just a very precious time, and God gave me that, and I'm very thankful for that. When Toby died, first and foremost, I was very thankful that he knew Christ. Mm-hmm. I knew that he was going to go to heaven, but I knew that my life was different, was never going to be the same. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what God had planned. I didn't know how he could leave me alone. You know, it's one of those scenes where I was like, God, really? My parents, you know, they were awful, and then the children's home, and now my husband, and, you know, what is up with you? You know? And I was very angry. I couldn't pray. You know, I just couldn't. All I could do was just throw my hands up in the air. I just threw my hands up in the air. I don't even know what to say. What do you say when you've lost the other part of you? And how am I going to function? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? We lived in a very small house on the wrong side of town, and I'd been broken into several times. And the first concern that everyone had was, you got to get your mom out of that house. And everybody that approached said that. And, I was just like, I don't know where I'm going to go. I have 2 dogs. But, God, let me just preface this by saying it was the worst year and the best year of my life. And I want you to understand that the worst part was losing my husband, whom I adored, I loved, and I miss him like crazy. And but I've seen the best of God and God's people in this year. I've seen more than any one person is entitled to, and it's all by God's grace. I have been blessed beyond anything that I could imagine. The prayers, people praying for me when I couldn't pray for myself. The cards, I cannot tell you the number of cards, notes, letters that I received, telling me that they were praying for me, that, that how much Toby meant to them. The funeral itself was just a celebration of life. It was so amazing. It was everything that the kids and I could want it to be for him, because he did not want it to be sad. He wanted it to be a glorious occasion. He wanted the gospel to be preached, and it was. The people that came to the funeral, the ones that came and spoke afterwards, I cannot tell you the numerous. The yard guy, my yard guy did my yard from the time Toby went in the hospital in February 13th until May, and would not take a penny. Not a penny. He came every 2 weeks and took my yard, and I kept saying, please let me pay you. No, this is for Toby. This is for you and Toby. The vet, Toby had given me this sweet little dog. He gave me the first one, Isabel, for my birthday about 11 years ago. And she was such a good dog, he decided, I had been begging for another one. And he decided to give me the little one for Christmas before he died. And so when the funeral and everything was going on, I thought, I need to put the dog somewhere, because she's a baby. She was a month, like 3 months old when he went in the hospital. And I said, so I called the vet that I use, and they said, bring them on right now. And I took them, and they did not charge a penny for keeping them, for a couple nights. The blessing upon blessing upon blessing, the God provided a house. I was approached. Somebody said they had a house I could rent. It's in a nice neighborhood, quiet, sweet house, much bigger than the one I was in, much quieter neighborhood than where I was at. So I had a house. Then I was like, well, what am I going to do for furnishings, Well, because, I had this house and no furniture to put in it. And, someone came and said, I have furniture. And, so I was like, okay. So I got furniture, And then moving, I was like, how am I going to move, Dan Strickland and Brian from the church called and said, we want to help you move, we want to help you do whatever you need. And I said, well, I need help moving. Well, the next I know, there's 25 trucks at my house on the Saturday we're moving. And I'm not kidding you. People will attest to this. They had me out of one house, into another house, beds made, sheets done, everything within 2.5 hours. Nobody does that, okay? I did. But it was God. It was all God. It was God provided that, because I didn't know. And I'll be honest with you. I was like in a blur. It was like it's like a time warp. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like one part of your life is right here, and the other part of your life keeps on marching. And so you keep on going, and you just do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But this part of your life is kind of stalled. It's kind of stopped, and you don't know what to do. You don't know you know, and it's like, and I'm receiving all these gifts. My house sold in like 2-3 weeks, something like that. It was ridiculous. Had 2 offers on it. Who knew that? The old house that I lived in, you know. It stunned me and my realtor. You know, we were both like, what? I mean, we couldn't believe it, you know, but it did. And it was all God. Every single thing was God. Every single thing pointed to God and God's people. He pointed it, he gave them a direction, he told them where he wanted them to go, and they followed through. And everything. Now, the puppy, I need to tell you, when we were in the hospital, Toby told me, or told a friend of mine, that he wished he had not bought me the puppy, because now I had 2 things to take care of, him and the puppy. Well, let me tell you what, that puppy, if it had not been for that puppy, there were days I would not have gotten out of bed. That puppy, the older dog, she just stayed in bed with me. She was fine. But and we would have just laid there for days. I mean, you know. But that puppy, every single morning, that puppy would get up and it would jump on the bed and it would be like, good morning. If it could talk, I know that's what she would be saying, because she would be saying, good morning. And she was so excited about the day. And that puppy got me through some of the worst days of my life. That puppy that he thought he shouldn't have given me. But God knew that I needed that puppy. He knew that that puppy was going to help me get up in the mornings. He knew that that puppy was going to give me a life, a smile. You know, and that's what it did. Every day I'd get up with that puppy and I would begin the day. And, you know, it was the last thing he ever gave me, but it was one of the most precious that he'd ever gave me, because it really gave me life, you know. But God's faithfulness has been so powerful this year to me in every aspect of my life. I cannot tell you. If you do not believe in modern day miracles, I am here to tell you I have witnessed them every single day. I have witnessed a miracle from God. And he has just shown me, and it's like somebody said, you know, he shows you a path. God did not show me a path. He shoved me down the highway. He was like, no, we're not even going to talk about it. This is where you're going. This is where you're going. This is what you're going to do. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm going to handle this. And I was so alone. And God said, no, you're not. I'm still here. I am your Father. I am your Father. I am here. I have not left. I am still here. And he has shown me that every step of the way, because trust me, if it was not for that, I would not be up here today. I can promise you that. Now, I want to close my part with saying that when the women's ministry team approached me about speaking several months ago, the first time I said yes, and then I declined closer to the event. I was like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And it was a good thing, because I came to the event, and after the second speaker, I was sobbing, and I left. And God knew it wasn't time, but I didn't ask God's permission. I just thought that I knew. Well, this time, when they approached me, I thought, you know what? I'm going to pray about this. I'm going to just see, because I'm not going to leave you in a lurch again, and I'm not going to say, you know, that I will and then not. So I'm going to go home and pray about it. And, you know, I'm going to let God show me, and he's going to have to really lay out the fleece, because I'm telling you, I'm not going to just, you know. So it was on a Thursday. So the next morning I got up, and I was doing my little devotional book that I have, which is a great little devotional book. And the very next one, no joke, this was the one I woke up to. I marked it, 128:19. I marked it, and it says, Important Pieces is the title of it. And it says, the Lord calls his children, bestows each with spiritual resources, and lavished with his grace beyond their own comfortable circle of blessings. And I'm having a hard time reading because my eyes are watery. Comfortable circle of blessing in the spaces where others' needs abound. He is calling you to open your hearts more fully to Him so that you can minister with even greater compassion to those He brings to mind out of your love and gratitude for what He's done for you. Okay, is God not telling me something right there? I mean, no act of service is too small. The little piece you do matters. Every piece matters. Everything you do creates an impact somewhere else you cannot see, but it's a part of a big picture that God is putting together. So do it, give it, extend it, support it, serve it, care for it, be a part of it. Whatever God has given you to do, do with all your heart and passion, because even the least is great when you do it for His sake. Now, did God tell me to get up here and do that or what? I mean, I'm one of those that have to have a fleece. And God He threw the fleece down and wet it and soaked it and turned it over and wet it and soaked it again and then dried it up. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you that everything matters. Everything matters. Every little thing you do matters, because you don't know. If it had not been for a 12-year-old girl, I would not be here today. If it had not been for the men loving on Toby and me and the 12-year-old girl and Jesus extending her parents to me, my family would not be saved today. My husband would not be in heaven today. Mm. Everything you do matters. Whether it's a card, whether it's a note, whether it's a cupcake, my favorite thing to say, whatever it is, do it, because you don't know what that person might be needing that day, and that you might be the answer to that. And I am here to testify that those of you that have done that to me, you have no idea what you've done for my life. You have no idea. So thank you very much.
Three things, and we'll wind it up. But I just want to make a quick illustration. We've talked about salt, and we've talked about light. If in some of your time here at First Baptist, or for your time in Auburn and Opelika, if Kathy's life has enhanced your life, would you please stand up?
Oh, Lord.
This isn't about Kathy. This has nothing to do with Kathy. This has to do with the Lord using a woman that was willing, that He saved her out of dark. It's a light, and you enhanced a tremendous amount of women. And we thank you. We thank you for being used.
Thank y'all.
So y'all may sit. Thank you. Thank you. That was just a simple illustration, but a powerful illustration. And if you are new to our church, know that we have a place for you. If you are old to our church, we have a place for you. And thank you for being here and serving. But this evening would be pointless or worthless if we didn't address salvation. And so I have some questions that are going to come up, and I just want to address them with y'all real quick. I just want to make sure before you leave tonight, has there been a place in your life where you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? Has there been an experience in your life where you've gone from the dark to the light? And if that is something that you're unsure of, that myself or the women's ministry team or even your hostess at your table, we have name tags, the women's ministry team, but even your hostess at your table would love to visit with you. That is the most important thing we can do this evening. And I'll stand over here if you want to come visit. To make sure that you've had that experience, that you know as your children address Toby with, where are you going to be? When it's all said and done, where are you going to be? And you need to know that you have, that Jesus has come, He's paid the full cost. You just need to reach your hand up and take His. And the second one, as we gave an illustration and Kathy has shared, where are you salt and light? In this church, in your family, in your community, at work, the list could go on and on. But as Ashley opened us with Matthew 5, that we're all called, if you're a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, we're called to be light and we're called to be salt into this world. And I'm sure there are places that we could all enhance. To finish with, Shelley Riddle from our team found this song, and we're going to play it. The evening is over. We are closing this evening. But we're going to play this song, and the lyrics are on the board, and they go exactly with our theme for the night. So if you need to go, we thank you for being here. If you want to stay and visit quietly, if you want to meditate on the song and the lyrics, you're welcome to. There might be some moving around you with some cleaning up, but this is for y'all, and y'all are welcome to be here and soak it in and just spend this time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.